Philadelphia, get ready to be inspired. If you need help finding the light in the darkness, don't touch that dial. Let's navigate life through the lens of hope with Scotty P. Inspirational speaker Scotty P speaks the importance of mental health in society and encourages techniques to overcome the everyday mental health obstacles that hold us back in life. It's not just inspiration, it's Scotty P Inspiration.
Good evening, Philadelphia and all the surrounding counties and areas, and for all those who are listening to this podcast nationwide, thank you so much for being here today for another episode of the Scotty P Inspiration Show. Thank you so much for joining. I hope everybody's had a great week and you're excited that it's Friday, and I'm so thankful that you're starting your weekend with me here at the Scotty P Inspiration Show to get your weekend started with some inspiration and to help you navigate your life through the lens of hope. So thank you for everyone being here today. If you don't know, my name is Scott Prendergast, aka Scotty P. I'm your host. This is my show, and I'm thankful to be here today with you all. So before we get started, if you want to listen to past episodes of my show, a couple ways you could do that. You could go on www.dbam.com, search the Scotty P Inspiration Show, view it that way. You can go on Spotify and search the Scotty P Inspiration Show, Apple Podcasts, and any major podcasting forum. You can watch it or listen to it that way. And you can also go on my YouTube channel, that's scottypinspiration.com, and you can watch videos along with the audio on there too. So whatever your preference is, we got something for you here to do, okay? So everybody, thank you so much again for being here. Now today, as you know, I like to just jump into the topic because I want you to be able to take something positive from this and apply it to your life right here, right now, without all that fluff and rah, okay? So without further ado, we're going to jump into it. I'm going to give you my quote because that's how I like to start the show. It sets the scene real nice, and then we're going to go from there and see what happens today, okay? So today, the quote that I have is this. It's a little weird, but it's a quote from myself from something that I did during one of my presentations, okay? So the quote is as followed. When we have hope in our lives, that leads to us seeking out help. And when we seek out help, that's when we learn how to heal. And that is a quote from Scott Prendergast, a.k.a. that is me, okay? Now, I chose this quote to start this show today because it really hammers home the foundation of what it is that I want to talk about with this episode today. And what I'm really talking about is trying to find hope in life, but specifically when somebody's dealing with depression, right? Now, when we say that word depression, a couple of things come to mind. One, you have some people that are like, no, we're not talking about that, blah, blah. And then you have other people who are like, oh, depression, yes, I'll never get out of that. And so you have these two different types of groups of people who react differently when you hear the word depression. And for you, the listener, I don't know how you react to it. It might be different. But what I really want us to understand today is that we want to understand what depression is, how and why it can be difficult to find hope, but how we can find hope even in the darkest places of that depression, okay? So let's kind of start with this. What is depression? Obviously, we all have our own ideas of what it is, but one of my favorite definitions of it is as follows. Depression is a medical illness, right? That's important to understand. It is a medical illness that negatively affects how you think, how you feel, and how you behave, all right? So what that tells me is that depression is an all-consuming thing. It's not just here, it's not just there, but it is every aspect of life. It's all-consuming. And that's important to understand because there is a difference between just being depressed and being sad. You know, we've all had the feeling of sadness before, but we haven't all experienced depression, right? Sadness is something that comes and goes. It is a feeling that is usually, for the most part, somewhat temporary, right? Now, that temporal nature could be a day, could be a week, could be 2 weeks, but it's something that we're able to kind of work through. Whereas depression is essentially like having that feeling of sadness never go away, even when you're doing things you love, even when you're with people you enjoy being with, even when you used to engage in activities that meant more to you than anything, that sadness still won't leave. That, on a very basic level, is the difference between just being sad and what depression is. And it's important to know that, and I wanted to make sure I share that before we dive deeper into this. So, now that we understand the difference between sadness and depression, on previous episodes, I've talked about how to find hope because that's what my business is all about here when you're just dealing with some of those sad, difficult times. But what about when you're literally in depression? When you're going through it, whether you've been diagnosed or not, but when you're in that place where you've lost interest in everything, where you feel like your life doesn't matter, where you feel like you can't get out of bed, where you feel like nothing puts a smile on your face and you're lethargic and you're in just the pits, that dark place of clinical depression, what do you do then? This is where things get interesting, right? Because a lot of people would argue that being depressed means you cannot find hope now, no matter how hard you try. And I understand what people say when they're referencing that. But what's important to understand is that hope is something that I like to think it's really bulletproof. It's like it can't be distracted or destroyed by anything, not even depression. But sometimes when you're depressed, you have a more difficult time finding it. So we've got to adjust our lens at how we're looking for hope. That's what's important, okay? Now, to go along with this, what I really think is important to understand is that people may feel that they don't have hope in their lives because of certain situations or circumstances or what's happened to them, and other people may feel like they don't have hope because they're dealing with that depression. No matter what it is, no matter what the circumstance is for you, a lot of people will think that, okay, I'm depressed now, there's no chance for me getting hope, I'm just gonna stay stuck in this place forever. Even if they get out of that depression, they still don't truly find that hope. Now, when it comes to finding hope, I'm not going to sit here and tell you there's one way to do it, because there's not. You know, everybody's case is different, everybody's life is different, everyone's enjoyments and view of hope is different. There's not one way to go about this, okay? And it's important to understand that. But what is important to do is learning how to identify that hope and really hold on to it and grasp it. And like I said, that looks different for everybody. Now, one of the things that I've developed through my business and speaking and the book that I'm writing as well is this term that I came up with that I think really describes this type of grasping for hope in a way that we can all relate to. Now, the term that I came up with is as follows. This term is called emergency joys. And if you're a follower of my show or me on social media or you see me speak, you know that I talk about this a lot because I think it's so relatable for all of us. Now, here's what emergency joys are. They are those 3 or 4 positive coping skills, those 3 or 4 things that we hold on to, that we turn to, that we rely on when we're having one of those days, one of those months, one of those years where we feel like we just don't have anything else in our lives. Right? Think about it. When you have one of those days where you wake up in the morning and you just feel like you can't do it anymore. Right? Or when you have one of those days where you look at yourself in the mirror and you just hate what you see more than anything in this world. Right? Or when you have one of those days where you feel like everyone and everything in this entire world is just against you and nothing seems to be going your way. And it's been like that forever. Okay, my friends and listeners, it's at moments like this that we kind of reach into our life's toolbox, so to speak, and we pull out these emergency joys. Those positive coping skills, those things that we turn to that mean more to us than anything. Those ones that we know that when we're in the darkest of dark possible places that we could be in our lives, that they're still going to give us that little glimmer of hope. They're still going to give us that little bit of joy, that little bit of a smile on our face, even when we feel like we have no reason to. Those things in your life, whatever that is for you, that's an emergency joy. And it's at times like this, especially when you're dealing with clinical depression, that you really need to learn to grasp onto those things. And not rely on that emergency joy to pull you out of that depression, no. Okay, that's where people get confused. They're like, okay, Scott said emergency joy, so I'm gonna inundate myself with emergency joy so much that I'll pull myself out of depression and everything will be great and I'll be totally fine. No, that's not what I'm saying. Emergency joys help us to rediscover hope. And friends, when we have hope in our lives, let's take it back to the quote that I said at the beginning. That's when we learn how to seek help. And when we seek help, that's when we learn how to heal. So emergency joys are simply the first step in this process. But as we know, for many things in life, the first step is not only the hardest, but also the most important. And hope and finding that hope and that foundation, that's really nourishment for the human soul, right? And when we don't have hope in our lives, we see it time and time again. That's when terrible things happen. When people lack hope, when people don't have hope anymore, that's when it's almost like your soul's gone dark, right? And hope is something that we need every day, but especially when we find ourselves dealing with depression, especially when we're in that place where we feel like we'll never get out of it, especially when we're having those days where we just question if we even want to live or not. That's when it's more imperative than ever to turn to those emergency joys, to rediscover that feeling of hope again and allow that feeling of hope to get you on the road to seeking help. And when I say seeking help, you have to understand as well, that's going to look different for everybody. For some people, seeking help simply means just talking to somebody about it, about what they're dealing with. For others, that might mean going to a therapist or starting medication. That might mean an alternative route. It's not for me to say. That's for you, the listener, the individual, to figure out what works for you. But I think I could say with full confidence that hope is something that every single human on this earth needs in order to get to that next level, in order to get that spot of getting that help and finding some of that peace and joy and happiness again. Hope is the foundation of all of that. And when we learn to find it and learn to identify it, that's when some pretty powerful things happen. So let's say you're listening to this right now. You're like, okay, Scott, I like this. I vibe with it. I'm going, I'm cooking, we're doing some things. Yeah. But how do you identify hope? How do you identify something to have hope for when everything about your life just makes you feel unhopeful? I had somebody ask me that once, and I thought about it. And I really did. I thought, okay, yeah, how do you do that? Because I remember what it was like for me when I was in a place where I felt like I had no hope, where I was in a place where everything seemed so dark and it would never change. And I thought back to that and I figured, what did I do to grasp a little glimpse of that hope again? And I remembered my emergency joys, which is where I came up with that term. But I also thought about something else. And what I did is I stopped trying to look for the solution to my problem. And instead, I started looking for something that was going to provide me with a little bit of clarity in my situation. So in other words, instead of trying to find something that was going to quick fix and take all my issues away, I switched my lens to say, okay, in this day today, what has happened, what I feel. But despite that, what can I do to change my view of this moment? And it came down to a moment-by-moment process. When I was in the darkest places of my own depression, that's what it came down to. It said, okay, in this moment, I need to find something to help me. And a little example for you, for me, this is super random, but one of those things that really helped me was watching the TV show Seinfeld. Random cheesy show about nothing and four friends that were complete fools sometimes, right? But I would watch the show 2 episodes every night before I went to bed. And for that 1 hour, when I watched the show, I forgot about the problems. I forgot about the issues. I forgot about the lack of hope. And instead, I thought about something that made me smile for a little bit. And as I went throughout my days, I'd say, hey, maybe nothing's going right today. Maybe I'm upset. Things aren't going well. But I know that I've got this Seinfeld show to watch before I go to bed. And that is something for me to grasp. That's something for me to hold on to. And it really started with that. But it started in a moment-by-moment thing. And then after I'd watch Seinfeld, I would go to bed. Or before that, I said, okay, I need another moment to bring me some joy. You know what I started to do? I started to make sure I was eating my favorite breakfast every single morning. Now you may say, okay, Scott, how is eating your favorite breakfast bring you joy? Well, I'll tell you exactly how. Because that meant that the first thing that I did in that moment when I woke up was I was doing something that put a little bit of joy, a little bit of hope, a little bit of a smile on my face for 3 or 4 minutes as I ate my favorite breakfast. So in that moment, I had some hope. In that moment, right? Because we're talking about how it's a moment-by-moment thing. And so I had to find things to fill those moments with some hope in a positive way. And what's important to understand is that when we talk about these hopeful things, that does not mean turning to something that's going to hurt you or hurt others or are harmful to you in any way. No, we call that a negative coping skill, and we do not want to do that because it's only going to create more problems. We've got to find those positive coping skills that are going to bring us that hope and peace in a way that is going to be healthy for us and lead us down the right road to ultimately getting that help. And so I'm not sure what that is for you, but I hope that's something that you think about as you listen to this show today and something that you'll start to identify in your life, okay? So everybody, we got so much more to talk about. I'm pretty hyphy and excited about it. Don't go anywhere. Stay with us. We're going to be right back after these very quick commercial breaks.
Hey everyone, Eric Katz here, the owner of Katz Dogs Canine. Are you working from home and need to get your dog out running around for the day? Will you be traveling this summer and looking for a place to board your pup? Is your dog looking a little shaggy and need a haircut or bath? Are you looking forward to walking around and enjoying this beautiful weather, but you can't because your dog's pulling like a freight train? Well, you're in luck. We're a one-stop shop that focuses on daycare, boarding, grooming, and training. We're located at 35 Middle Road, Percy, PA on 10 beautiful acres. You can check us out on Facebook and Instagram at CatsDogsCanine or our website, catsdogscanine.com. Our phone number is 855-CATS-DOG, 855-528-9364.
What's going on, everyone? This is Scott Prendergast here, aka Scotty P. Real quick, I want to talk to you about my business. It's called Scotty P Inspiration. And what I am is I'm an inspirational speaker, and I want to help others navigate life through the lens of hope. Now, I do this through speaking engagements, but also one-on-one life coaching. So if you're interested in booking me or doing some of that coaching, let me know. Check me out at www.scottypinspiration.com or check out my Instagram at scottyp_inspo. Find Yourself Boxes was created to foster the connection between a person and those in life who may be working through mental health challenges by providing curated and customizable boxes filled with research-backed wellness products that promote healing. Coupling personal experience with professional mental health guidance, Find Yourself Boxes meets people where they are on their journey. Wellness doesn't look the same for every person, and these products are packaged together to touch various aspects of our wellness spectrum. Find your healing with Find Yourself Boxes at findyourselfboxes.com, and you can get 20% off your first purchase. And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Friday. Excuse me, no, it is Friday. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Scotty P Inspiration Show. Sorry about that. I was thinking about a different radio show that I used to do. Well, thank you all for being here, for staying tuned with us. And if you're just tuning in, we've been talking about hope today and how to find hope, especially when we find ourselves dealing with clinical depression, right? So if you're just tuning in, my name is Scott Prendergast, aka Scotty P. I'm your host. This is my show, and I'm thankful for you listening today. And if you want to listen to previous episodes, you could go on www.dbam.com. You can search my show. You can search my show, the Scotty P Inspiration Show, on any major podcast websites such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or you could go on YouTube and search Scotty P Inspiration and watch past episodes that way as well. So if you're just tuning into us, we've been talking all about hope today, how to find it, how to understand it, and realize the difference between finding hope when we're just struggling and also finding hope when we're dealing with clinical depression. Now, as we continue on this thread here, one of the things that I think is really important to understand, because I love to just jump into things here, as you know, so we're going to get going, we're rolling, let's go. I think that so many times when we're dealing with sadness, the reason that we'll kind of transfer over from just being sad to falling into actual depression is because we're in what I like to call autopilot mode. Now, autopilot mode, so to speak, essentially what it is that when we're allowing our emotions and our feelings to just completely take over and we're not questioning them at all and we're not really fighting back, so to speak. So that when we get sad, we just let this sadness translate into negative and anxious thoughts. And then we let that negative and anxious thoughts translate into feeling worthless, feeling like we don't matter. And then that feeling will translate into behaviors that represent that feeling and those thoughts as well. So when we're in autopilot mode, it's like we're stuck in this cycle of negative thinking, of sadness, whatever your emotion might be, and we're just letting it essentially bully us. You know, I kind of think of it like this. I imagine that our brain is like an apartment, like a house, okay? And, you know, someone knocks on the door and it's all these negative and sad emotional thoughts, and we just let it into our house and they start making a mess. They start inviting all these people over. They start having some wild parties, and we're just sitting there saying, okay, yeah, that's fine, and we're not doing anything about it. We're just letting these thoughts and these emotions completely dictate every single thing that we do in our lives, right? And that leads to so many different types of problems. And then it gets to a point where we're so lost in those emotions and feelings, we don't even know where to start to get out of it, right? And that can be a really dangerous and scary place. Now, what can we do to combat this, to fight back against it? Well, there is stuff that we can do. But what I have to tell you is that it's sometimes a little uncomfortable, because it does take some work. You know, in a world where everybody wants all their pain and problems to go away overnight, when we're talking about dealing with social emotional learning and dealing with depression and dealing with things like CBT and different exercises to work through this stuff, it does take time. And it does take resilience and persistence, and it's not something that just will change overnight. But with that being said, the science behind it is undeniable. So this stuff does work. And if we're willing to put in the work, we will see the changes. And I know for me, I'm a testimony to that, because I've seen the changes in my life from going somebody who was dealing with depression, who was, you know, in a super low place, to being someone whose career now is to inspire others. So I can definitely testify that this stuff works. I really, really can. Now, it's not the only thing that played a part in that. For me, a lot of other things played a part in that too. In addition to CBT, my faith was a big part of that, and my family as well. But the CBT strategies that I learned really did a lot for me. So when I say getting out of autopilot mode, one of the first ways that we do that is learning to become self-aware. Now, this is a bit of a buzz term nowadays, especially in the mental health field. Everyone's like, let's talk about self-awareness. How do we become self-aware? And you'll see these like random people that don't know anything on like GMA and stuff saying, oh, self-awareness is key. And then they don't give you any examples, right? So when we say self-awareness, really what it means is learning to become aware of the thoughts and feelings that we're having in that particular moment. Okay, so instead of going about the day feeling absolutely devastated and not addressing it, not understanding why, self-awareness teaches us that we want to understand, okay, I'm feeling this way. Why am I feeling this way? What can I do to change it? What happened to make me feel this way? So essentially the process of learning to ask ourselves questions and questioning the negative or anxious thoughts or sad thoughts that seem to be occupying our brain, right? So that's really one of the ways that we get out of this autopilot mode. But what you need to understand as the listener is this will take some time. And it'll take some time because I'll explain this quickly because I want to move on to other parts. But essentially the process looks like this. We have these things called neural pathways in our brain. Okay? Now, neural pathways, the best way to explain it is as if, imagine you're walking through the woods and you see a worn down path where a lot of people have walked. It's very clear, a clear path to take. Now, that clear path, so to speak, in the same way is what it looks like in our brain sometimes when we're so used to being negative or sad or angry with ourselves, right? And so the automatic response of us is to go down that worn down path because it's familiar, it's easy. But what we want to do is when we have a path that's worn down, that's that negative thinking, we got to learn to create a new path, a new neural pathway. And as you can imagine, that can be a little bit uncomfortable because the brain is constantly saying, no, I want to go down this worn down path. I've been doing this for months or years. I want to keep going down this path. And we're trying to fight back against it saying, no, we want to create a new one, right? Now, the process of learning to create a new one begins with identification, becoming self-aware. And then the next step is, okay, we want to replace and change the way that we think from this negative way or this sad way, this anxious way, whatever it is you're dealing with, and instead start to change those thoughts to thoughts that are going to be self-affirming, that might be positive, that are going to be thoughts that are going to take you in a different direction, all right? And the way that we do that, it's a good old-fashioned way, is when you have a situation when you feel yourself starting to go down that negative path, we stop, we identify it, and we say no, and you gotta fight back. It's not easy because your brain's going to want to fall into that sadness. It's going to want to fall into that despair. It's going to want to fall into that anxiety. But you stop it and you fight it. And you say, I see what's going on here. I see I'm going down that path. I am switching. I'm going down this path no matter how uncomfortable it is because I need to start building up that new path, that new neural pathway. Okay? And so maybe that looks like you being absolutely miserable one day, but choosing to say, you know what? Things aren't going right in my life. I'm not feeling great. I'm upset, but I'm going to focus on a couple things that I have to look forward to today. I'm going to focus on the gratitude that I have towards this area of my life. So when we make a decision like that, something as little as that, we're not giving into that old worn down neural path of slipping into that negativity, but we're starting to build a new one towards going towards that positive way of thinking. And over time, it'll become easier because that new neural path will become more worn down, and that'll become the way that we start to think. So that's a little bit of the science, a little bit of the background to understand how this stuff works, right? So now you can go home and be like, bro, I learned something from Scotty P on the show today. Much love, vibes, okay? So to take this a little bit further, we still got a couple minutes left of the show. One of the things that I think is super important for us is reflection. Now, I know reflection can be tricky because for some people who have had a past that maybe is hurtful or brings back trauma, when you reflect on that, it can be like, oh my goodness, I don't want to think about that. And we tend to block it out. But there's a lot of difficult, dysfunctional things that can come from trying to block out the past too. So what I mean is when I say reflection is learning to be choosy with our reflection and reflect on the times and the experiences that we've had in which we've overcome certain obstacles or in which we've found good in this or did some type of accomplishment or our triumphs or different things that we've done. When we reflect on this stuff, it kind of brings evidence back to us in the current moment to say, hey, look, you know, I've done this before. I've had good memories before. I had good things happen before. I can and will do it again. So when you find yourself in that dark place, in that low place, in that struggling place, you remember those past triumphs, those past reflective things that were good. I'm not saying it's going to change your situation because it won't. but it might spark a little bit of that hope that you've been looking for, that you can keep doing it, that things will get better. And with just a littlest spark of hope, some serious, amazing things can happen. And when you're in that low place, we're looking for any spark of hope to ignite that fire, right? And sometimes it might just be reflecting on a past experience in which you did overcome something. So for you, the listener today, I want you to think about that. I want you to reflect on some of the good things in your life instead of always reflecting on what didn't go right, what didn't happen your way, what you didn't love. I want you to reflect on some of those good things and allow that to just wash over you a little bit in this moment, okay? I want you to do that. So as we take this a little bit further, one of the things that I say a lot when I work with people one-on-one with life coaching is about the desire and pursuit of happiness. Now, I'm not talking about the movie by Will Smith, although one of my favorites. I'm not talking about the pursuit of happiness in, the Declaration or whatever it is. I mean, everybody wants to be happy. Of course, we all do. But I think we're looking for happiness in the wrong places. And what I mean by that is people think that when you reach a certain level or get to a certain age, there will be this happiness waiting for you, like you unlock the new level and you'll just always be happy once you get that. And time again, we hear how people aren't. Because here's the thing. Happiness is in a state. It's not something that you pick up and hold on to and grab, but rather it's a feeling. So what do we know about feelings? Feelings come and they go. So one day you might be happy. There might be another day a few weeks later where you're not, right? It comes and it goes. But what's important to understand is that when you're in a position where you're not feeling happy, that doesn't mean that you won't be a month from now. So what we need to do is when we're in those difficult times, we need to make sure that we are holding on to something to spark some of that hope to get us through those difficult times so that we'll be able to receive and enjoy that happiness when the time does come. Because if we don't find something to pull us through, we'll find ourselves in such a dark place that we won't even be able to recognize happiness when it's there, right? So we've got to find that stuff to pull us through. And remember, happiness is temporary, but pain and sadness is also temporary. It's not permanent. You will feel that happiness again. But it takes a little effort sometimes to get it and to find it. And some of that effort means becoming self-aware, doing some of these little strategies, reflecting on the good times even when you don't want to. This is some of the work that it takes to be happy, but it's nothing that we can't do. And that's important to understand. So everybody, as we get towards the end of the show here, we just got about 45 more seconds. I want to leave you kind of with this. I want you to understand that depression is treatable. It's not something that's the end-all be-all. It's treatable. And I want you to understand that hope looks so different for everybody. It looks different for you at different times in your life, but that hope is something that is available to you if you will open your eyes and allow yourself to hold on to it and grasp it. And if you're willing to put that work into it, I guarantee you that hope is not going to end with hope. It's going to lead to action, and that action is going to lead to a change in your life. So today, I want you to find some of that hope. Reach out, grab it, whatever that looks like for you, and hold on to that and know that it will change, it will get better, and that hope is going to be the catalyst that's going to get you there. But it starts with hope. We need that before anything else. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening, for tuning in today. Have a great weekend. Enjoy it. Thanks so much again. We'll tune in again next week for more inspiration from me, Scotty P. Have a great day, everyone. This is Scotty P signing off.